Rankings.
Hello and welcome to round 17 of the TPO Rankings Show, a show where we talk about Australian football through the lens of the TPO Rankings. You can think of it like the FIFA World Rankings, but for Australian football clubs. How many football clubs? We'll be talking that a little bit later. Actually, that's the main topic of tonight's show. But first of all, I better say hello to my co-host, Jake. Jake, how are you this evening?
Hello, Cody. I'm very well. I'm excited. This is a big one.
Yes, Jake, finally it's happened. We've expanded the rankings. And
Long time coming.
When I say we, I mean obviously you're the one doing it all, the late nights. But so thank you very much, Jake. Yeah, not quite as much as we had hoped. We had hoped to expand to over 1,000 clubs. But, you know, little baby steps. So we've added over 150 clubs to the rankings, which brings the total number here, I think I've got written down here, is 362 clubs. So we had 197. We're now at 362. So that's a fair few clubs.
Yeah,
but
we're not giving up on the 1,000. We're not giving up on that.
We're getting there. Yep, that is still a goal of ours. And we're going to go into some greater detail, obviously, on the expansion. That's the main topic of tonight's show. So we'll get there in just a few minutes. But first of all, we have 5 games to recap from the previous weeks or from the weekend. I may as well jump in. So we've got Canberra FC versus Canberra Olympics. So we both voted for a Canberra Olympic win. I think, 70% of you guys went Canberra Olympic. And they won 1-0. So, Jake, and we obviously have to clarify here, how have they moved on the rankings, these two teams? And because I think you've got a little note here about, is this movement on the new TPO rankings or the existing one?
Yeah, so because when we talked about these games last week and picked them as our games of the week, we were talking about their rankings at that point in time. What we're doing here is just going to say what the movement was on the old rankings. So this will be the last time we refer to the unexpanded rankings, and then when we get past these games, then we'll move on to the next bit. So all of the impact is before the expansion. Yeah,
cool. So Canberra Olympic keep their spot at 52nd, and Canberra FC drop 1 spot to 67th. My next game was Forrestfield United versus Sorrento in the WA NPL. We both backed Sorrento and they actually lost, so Forrestfield got up 2-0. Big win for Forrestfield, shot them up into the top 100 on the rankings, 99th to be specific. Sorrento fall 4 spots to 85th. Jake, you had 3 FFA Cup games. Let's hear it.
I did. So the first one was in Queensland on Saturday night, Lions versus Peninsula. You've probably already seen the result of this by now, and it was a bit of a surprise. So the TPO rankings predicted Lions to be the favourite and to win. Supporters, you guys overwhelmingly went with Peninsula, 78% of you. And Lions got up 6-0, which is incredible. I don't think anybody expected it to be that one-sided. In terms of the rankings, it was a big one for Lions. I mean, like we've mentioned before, the FFA Cup games have a slightly bigger impact on the rankings. But 6-goal margin against a quality side like Peninsula. Lions have shot up into the top 25 clubs in the country. They've 7 spots to be exact. They've moved up and they're sitting in 25th. And they're now the highest ranked club in Queensland, outside Brisbane Roar. And Peninsula, on the other hand, basically the opposite. The big fall down the rankings. They've fallen 7 places down to 45th, although they are still the highest ranked Tier 3 club in the country at the moment. Moving on to my second one, and the next 2 were both just Monday afternoon, so we're recording on a Monday night, so it was this afternoon. First one, South Australia. It was Adelaide Comets versus Croydon Kings in the final there in South Australia. We predicted a Comets win. You guys predicted a Comets win, and the result was a Comets win. So they got up 2-1 and qualified for the round of 32 in the FFA Cup. And on the back of that, Comets have moved up 2 places there into 22nd. And Croydon Kings continue falling. They're not having a particularly good year apart from this cup run, which is now over, and they're down another 2 spots down to 42nd. And from memory, they started the year in 2018 in about ranked 23rd or 24th in the country, so it's a long way down. The final one I had was the Tasmanian FFA Cup qualifier. It was Devonport City versus South Hobart. We predicted South Hobart. You guys predicted South Hobart, and in this case we were wrong. Devonport had a 1-0 win and will be the Tasmanian representative in the round of 32 this year. big movement for Devonport. They're up a few spots to 70th. That's a 7-0. And Hobart are down 6 places to 49th in the rankings before the expansion. So, those were my games. And 3 more clubs there, plus a handful of others that we didn't or haven't touched on. But FFA Cup getting very close to being confirmed, or the last 32 clubs as well.
Yep, only 4 spots remaining, I believe. So out of those 5 games we all voted on, we got three correct. TPO Rankings got 3 correct, and you guys, the supporters, got 2 correct. So that moves the scores to TPO Rankings 32 and TPO Supporters 29. So we've got a 3-point gap there. So
you guys falling behind.
To do. Yeah, that's it. And this week there won't be any games for the first time to vote on, because we're purely focusing on the expansion of the rankings. So time to talk expansion. As I mentioned earlier, Jake has spent a lot of time in Excel working on this, so you better damn listen what he has to say. But Jake, I've got a series of questions for you, so let's just jump right in. Firstly, can you read off the list of leagues that you've added to the rankings?
Yeah, and I don't even need to read them because I've been spending so much time on this. I think I know all of them off the top of my head. So I'll run through this. Not every state has had a new league added. The general rule was, if it was connected via promotion relegation, we wanted to try and put it in there. And if it's had a club that has qualified for the round of 32 FFA Cup in previous years, we wanted it in there as well. And then the final rule was, if Cody plays for one of the teams in that league, we wanted it in there as well. So that's why we got Sunny Coast. Exactly. So to run them off the list, we have the Western Australian Division 2, which is the 3rd tier there. South Australia, we have the State League 2, which is the 3rd tier there. Moving around to Victoria, we added the State League 1 Northwest and the State League 1 Southeast. And then below that, State League 2 Northwest and Southeast as well. So that's 4 new leagues in Victoria. New South Wales, we added 4 new leagues as well. We had the MPL 3, the State League, and then we went to the Illawarra Premier League and Illawarra District League. So that's those 4. And then Queensland, finally, we added 4 leagues there as well. The Brisbane Premier League, the Capital One, which is the league sitting below the Brisbane Premier League. And then we went the Gold Coast Premier League and the Sunshine Coast Premier League. So I don't know, were you counting, Cody? It was 12 or 13 new leagues.
No, yeah, that was right. Yep. So next question, Jake, and I do sort of know the answer to this, but for our listeners, so does the inclusion of these new clubs, new leagues, have any impact to the existing clubs' rankings?
Yeah, so there's 2 main ways essentially, and I'll keep it pretty simple. But the first one is, in terms of what games are included in the database right now, the main rule, or the only rule, is that it has to be an official game, but it has to be between 2 clubs that are already on the rankings. So if one or both of the clubs isn't in the rankings, we couldn't include it. So what that meant was, in previous years, there's been some games between, say, an MPL club and a State League team. And because the State League team wasn't in the rankings, we couldn't include the game. So now that we've included some of these lower leagues, there's been a number of those sort of games we're able to include. And look, the best example, just to illustrate it, is a game that we didn't touch on, but in Queensland there was a game between Sunshine Coast Fire and Gold Coast Knights for the FFA Cup qualifier. Before this expansion, Gold Coast Knights weren't in the rankings. So the fact that Sunny Coast Fire, the MPL team, lost to a regional club, because that wasn't in the rankings, they wouldn't have lost any points. Now that we have Gold Coast Knights in the rankings, we're able to include that game, and Sunny Coast Fire will fall down the rankings because of that. So there's a number of those games that are now coming in, and that's why you'll see some clubs move more than others. The other way that it can impact the existing clubs is we get more of the history of a club. So what happens when a new club enters the rankings for the first time is we have to give them a starting TPO score, and usually that is just the TPO score of whichever club they're replacing in that league. Now, the best example for this one is Altona Magic. So in 2018, Altona started in the MPL 2 in Victoria after winning promotion in the league before, and they took on the score of the clubs that were relegated, which was Richmond and somebody else who I can't remember right now. I've got it here. I'll come back to it in a minute. But what that meant is Altona basically picks up the score from the club that has had a very poor season and been relegated. Now, if you look back at Altona Magic's history over the last few years before 2018, they've actually won the league below it a number of times. And long story short, Altona Magic happens to be one. I'm jumping ahead to one of your questions in a minute, Cody, but Altona Magic's one of those ones that's going to have a big impact just simply because we've got more of the history. And that's probably a general comment as well. With the way the algorithm works, it's essentially self-correcting. And the short answer is the more games and the more data that we include, the more accurate they're going to be. So adding new leagues, new teams, more history is only a good thing.
Yep, absolutely. But it also means we have to take this seriously when we expand the rankings. We can't just go and add 1 or 2 teams at a time because it'll always shift. So the next expansion to the rankings will be another big event like this, most likely happening in the off-season. So, Jake, let's talk about some of these. So the existing clubs, the 197 clubs in the rankings at the moment. Can you tell me any standout or interesting movements up and or down the rankings from these clubs?
Yeah, definitely. So I noted here, like I just mentioned, I started saying Altona Magic, and I've got the other club here that was relegated that Altona came in and replaced, and that was Bendigo City. So Bendigo and Richmond went down, and Altona came in and replaced them. Now, in 20, and I've got a bit of the stats here, they have had a really good 2018, and that's why we're seeing them shit up the rankings so far. But if you look back at their history, not going too far, but 2015, Altona Magic finished third in the State League 1, which is the league that we've just added. In 2016, they actually finished first, but there was no promotion. And in 2017, they finished first again. So 3 really great years. So that history, and they've actually built up quite a good TPO score before they even reached the MPL2 this year. So because of that, Altona Magic is one of those that is going to be, or is, much higher in these expanded rankings than they were in the previous ones. And that's a good thing. I mean, to me, that kind of illustrates how this works. It's showing how it actually works by adding more history, because Altona Magic, everybody that's looking at their results and looking at the rankings says they're probably ranked too low. Well, now they're not going to be because we've added their history, so that's a good thing.
Sure.
So that most of the biggest beneficiaries, I guess, of this expansion are going to have the similar situation, just to a lesser extent. So I'll list a couple of them. Rydalmere Lions from New South Wales. Lang Warren is another one in a very similar situation to Altona Magic and promoted this year. Mitchelton in Brisbane. Fremantle City, Marconi Stallions and Guelph Croatia are all clubs that have moved up the rankings just on the back of this expansion. On the other side, there's really 2 reasons why a club might have fallen down the rankings. One is the reverse of what we just talked about, and then the other one is that we mentioned before. It's when a higher ranked club has lost to a lower ranked club, but that game wasn't included. So the Sunny Coast Fire versus Gold Coast Knights example. So the handful of clubs I've noted as the ones that have fallen away the most because of the expansions: Macarthur Rams from New South Wales, Nunawading City, Parramatta FC, Springvale White Eagles, Southwest Queensland Thunder, and Gold Coast United. And the Gold Coast United one's interesting because this is the first year they've existed or been in the rankings, and that fall is simply going to be because they were one of the clubs that lost to Gold Coast Knights in the FFA Cup earlier, in one of the earlier rounds, and that wasn't included, and now it is, so they drop away.
Okay.
There's a few, so that's the general, they're the main clubs. There are also some clubs that have fallen down the rankings just because there's some new teams that have come in that have jumped ahead of them. So not because they've lost any points, but if a team was ranked 180th in the old unexpanded rankings, there's going to be a number of clubs that come in above them and they'll end up lower. So probably some of the leagues that have had that happen to them a bit more than others are some of the Northern New South Wales UFM clubs that were ranked quite low are now even lower. Some of the ACT and Tasmanian NPL clubs, the ones towards the bottom, are lower. And the good old Wide Bay Buccaneers from the FQPL in Queensland have fallen a long way as well. So there's a long-winded answer.
That's the existing teams. Onto the new clubs, onto the bunch of 150 new clubs coming to the rankings. First up, and most importantly, where are Caloundra FC sitting?
Your Caloundra FC are sitting in at 273rd out of the 362. And that puts them as the third highest Sunshine Coast team at the moment, behind Noosa Lions, are the highest, and they're 226th. And before we move on, my little answer, just to add, I'm wearing a Stanmore Hawks jersey that I got off the club a little while ago. And in I guess because we were talking about expansion, Stanmore Hawks are now in the rankings as well at 252nd. So a little shout out to those guys.
Cool. All right, on to the serious questions now. Jake, who are some of these highest ranked clubs who are just entering the rankings?
All right, this is the interesting stuff, and I've got like half a page of notes here on just all the stuff I found interesting in like just my very short look. So there's lots to dig into, and I'll let other people go and do it. But the highest ranked club that is being added to the rankings in this expansion is Bully Football Club from the Illawarra Premier League, and they're coming in at 76th, so quite high. And I just want to give a very little quick bit of history or context for Bully, because I'd never even heard of them up until a couple of months ago. So
Jake, by the way, I think I said Bully to someone yesterday, and they said Bulli.
Bulli, sorry, I apologise.
It might be Bulli.
Yeah. All right, I'll swap it to Bulli, and if that's wrong, you can blame Cody. So yeah, because I hadn't heard of them, I'm assuming there's probably people not from New South Wales that may not either. So here's some of Bulli's stats from the Illawarra Premier League from 2013 until now, which is the time period that we've added to the rankings. So 2013, they finished second and lost in the grand final. 2014, they finished first, lost in the grand final. 2015, they finished second, lost in the semis. 2016, they finished second, lost in the semis. 2017, they finished first, lost in the grand final again. And 2018, they're currently first. So what that tells me is they haven't finished outside the top two in the last 5 years, and 2018, they're on track for sixth, and that they struggle to win a grand final. But that's quite an impressive set of records, or recent history anyway. And in terms of the FFA Cup, because this is kind of the way that we're best able to see how they compare to other clubs in their state. In 2015, they've competed over 4 years, so just a few quick ones. 2015, they lost to an NPL side, were knocked out there. 2016, they beat an NPL 2 side, beat an NPL 3 side, and then lost to Wollongong from the NPL, so they're kind of on par. 2017, they're beating a State League side, lost to Blacktown City from the NPL, so quite a tough matchup, and that was one game away from the national stage. So Bulli almost qualified for the round of 32. And then in 2018, this year, they beat an NPL 3 side before losing to St George, NPL 2. So kind of a mixed bag of results against some of the other NPL sides. So look, they're a great club with a really strong recent history. And to be honest, this kind of highlights to me why I love doing this and what these rankings kind of do for me personally. And just the fact that I now know a lot more about such a successful club in their, the grassroots in their own region that I'd never heard of a few months ago. So that's, quite impressive. I'll spend a bit of time on Bulli. Just a couple of the other clubs that have come in and are ranked quite high. There are 5 new clubs in the top 100 that weren't in there before. So Bulli, as I mentioned, 76th. Just to run through a few others, Mornington, who are in the Victorian State League 1 Southeast, come in at 82nd, and that's on the back of a really good 2017 and a fairly good 2018 so far. North Sunshine Eagles from the Victorian State League 1 Northwest come in at 88th. Geelong from Victorian State League 1 Northwest, so the same league, in at 91st. And Richmond from the Victorian State League 1 Southeast at 100th. So they're the top 5 new clubs. I've gone on long enough, but I'll just quickly run off a couple of the highest ranked clubs from some of the other new leagues that we've brought in. So Brisbane Premier League, we've got Albany Creek coming in at 119th. New South Wales NPL 3, the highest club there is St George City at 137th. South Australia from the State League 2 that we've just added is Adelaide Victory at 196th, so quite low. And Gold Coast Knights are the highest from the Gold Coast Premier League at 210th, and that will make them the lowest ranked club to qualify for the round of 32 FFA Cup this year. So, and one more, just turn my page over.
Yep.
Western Australia, in the Division 2 there, we had Olympic Kingsway, who are the highest ranked there at 218th. How's that for you, Cody? A data dump.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting stuff. And I don't know, we haven't done the image yet, Jake, but guys, if you want to see this, I imagine by the time this is up, it will definitely be on the website. If you're hearing me say these words or watching me say these words, head over to the website and you will see a bigger image, I suppose. Now it'll have to be sort of nearly double the size on our website of these rankings, and you can see where your team or other teams are placed. So that's some interesting stuff, Jake. So that's kind of all the questions I had for you, Jake. Do you have, but as you say, you love this stuff. You love going through all this sort of stuff. Do you have anything else you want to touch on about this expansion?
Yeah, just a couple of smaller things. So first, I just want to talk about the top 25, just because there's been a few changes based just on this expansion. So if you looked at the clubs sitting ranked 1st to 15th, they're exactly the same as what they were before. The TPO scores changed a little bit between them, but the ranking or the order is the same. The clubs, the next 10, so 16th through to 25th, they're the same clubs, but just a different order. They've shifted around a little bit. So the main ones that have moved are Metro Stars, who have actually moved up from 19th to 16th. Sydney Olympic are actually moving down a little bit, back down to 20th. And Sydney United also down a little bit to 25th. So there's, as I say, a little bit of movement around that area. And then the second thing I want to do just quickly is we'll get an image up on the screen here that is an update on one that we've done probably a couple of months ago now. And it shows basically an overall comparison of the different states and the different leagues from a TPO rankings point of view. And for those listening via podcast at this point, I'm not going to go into the detail. If you want to pull it up on your phone, feel free to do that. Otherwise, if you wait for a future week, we'll go into it in a bit more detail. But it's just one of those things that it's kind of up to interpretation for each person on what you think it's telling you and whether you think it's accurate or not. But it lets you compare, say, just as an example, the New South Wales NPL3 to, say, the Illawarra Premier League, to the Victorian State League 1 to the Brisbane Premier League. Like, you can kind of look across from left to right and see where the bars kind of sit against each other, and that gives an indication of the strength of each league. So, like I said, not going to spend any more time on that, but if you want to pause it and have a bit of a dig into that information, that's there for you as well.
Cool. There you have it, guys. Expansion is here. It's happening. It obviously means a lot more work for us, more Jake, every single week updating these rankings. And I suppose, caveat to that, the clubs in there at the moment, we can update those rankings pretty easily because the data is available. But some of these leagues, the data isn't always up to date and can be harder to find. So it might take a little bit of extra time or it takes a bit longer for us to update some of the leagues around the country. For example, the Sunny Coast League, the website's not always there. So for some teams, the updates to the rankings might take a little bit longer each sort of update, but we certainly will keep the main sort of top leagues up to date. That probably didn't make sense to you, but anyway. Now, normally we do, as I mentioned earlier, we preview a bunch of games for the coming weekend. We're not doing that because we've got an exciting show next week as well. I won't confirm what it's about yet, but I'm pretty sure we've got a good topic lined up. But yeah, if you've, I've got a favour to ask, guys. If you've watched or listened this far, first of all, thank you very much for sticking with us for about just over 20 minutes. But if you like the TPO rankings concept, if you think it's interesting, because we do, would you be able to share it with one person who you may think they may find it interesting as well? We find that when we talk to people about it, football people, they're like, oh, this is cool concept, bringing the clubs from around Australia together. But a lot of people, obviously, because we've only just started this year, haven't heard of it, and the best way for us to grow is still your word of mouth. So please share it where you can. Jake, anything from
probably
you?
just as an alternative to that request is tag somebody who, if you, let's say, you know somebody who plays for a club in the rankings, let them know if they haven't seen it already, and particularly if they're playing for a club that is lower on the rankings than your club or the club that you follow. We love a bit of banter as well, so that's a good way to get people involved.
Cool. Perfect. All right, guys, well, thank you very much for watching this week. Expansion here, still plenty to get our heads around and lots of work to do, but there's a first look at it. As always, head over to the website to check out the full list of 362 clubs. That's exciting stuff. Jake, thanks so much for your work, and thanks for joining me tonight.
No problem, Cody. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Cool. All right, thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.